together. Dear Father, you've made it clear in your word, Lord, that if we were half awake and we realize the nearness of the events portrayed, that there would be a great revival among us. And Father in heaven, it's so hard for us to just look square on into what is about to happen to us. But I ask that as we go through this next program, that our eyes will be wide open. And also, Lord, as we realize what is about to take place, I pray that you will fill our hearts with compassion for the millions of billions that do not know this message, that are facing a Christless grave. Place in their hearts the compassion of Jesus Christ, O Lord, as we study together. In Jesus' name, amen. Just before I start, I wanted to share, I was mentioning the issue of Good Health magazine that's put out. There's an article in it by Don Macon. I just want to read a couple of quotes. Those of you who understand the New Age movement will recognize immediately what's happening here. He says, when you become aware of the health problem, the first step is to consider the exact, real, present nature of the problem, not the horrors that words may conjure up. The second step is to imagine your goal, the situation that you would substitute for the present one. The third step is to find ways to reach that goal. Often, of course, the third step will involve professional treatment, but in many situations it needs no more than the guidance of imagination and the resources of the subconscious mind. In any case, a wise doctor will use his skill as an aid to a patient's imagination, which may sometimes defeat a treatment if it works against it. And in this patient describing how his healing took place, now I'll read. It says this is the fellow talking about his foot. He had a problem with his toe. One toe is crossing the other. A small complication occurred. The second toe on my left foot was beginning to creep over the big toe. I asked the doctor why the fact is. He said the big toe is burrowing under the other. It's the result of a lifetime of wearing shoes, and he mentioned the possibility of an operation ultimately. Immediately I ordered my imagination to work on postponing the ultimate indefinitely. Consequently, the next time I was doing my 5BX, I vividly imagined my deviant big toe agreeing to go straight again. As I lay on my back on the carpet, hand behind my head, and pulled myself up to a sitting position, my subconscious mind sent me a helpful suggestion. I looked at my toes and said, "You count for me." So the big toe moved for one, the second one, and so on, all the way down the line. After a few days, even though each toe had to struggle for its independence, the big and second toes began to sort it out. And then there's the common problem of the sore finger, and he goes on. But you can see what's happening. He's using his subconscious mind to heal his own body. That's witchcraft. That's the occult. And this little magazine is full of it. That's our health magazine. Sorry to talk about toes and things right now. But I'd like to read you something. We know that as soon as the sealing work is finished in behalf of God's church throughout the world, referring to all who are faithful to Jesus Christ that come out at the end of time, then there's going to be a terrible releasing of powers that are called the four winds. And when we read in Revelation chapter 7, verse 1, it says these four angels on the four corners of the wind, holding the four winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth or on the sea until the servants are sealed. When the sealing work comes, Jesus ends his mediation, and the time of trouble, the great time of trouble, begins. I'd like to read to you what those winds are. John says the elements of nature, earthquake, tempest, and political strife are being held by the four angels, manuscript 266. Another place she broadens it, and she says this. The judgments of God are in our land. They're already here. And she lists them: fire and flood and earthquake. In quick succession, the judgments of God will follow one after another. Fire, flood, earthquakes, with war and bloodshed. In another place, she says, at the end of time, war will rage on the earth. Another place she talked about men and demons devising. It's in the book Maranatha, and I didn't bring my copy, so I can't give you the exact page. But that men and demons would devise terrible means of warfare. And we're on the verge of a fulfillment of that tremendous prophecy. When we can see the events taking place in our church, we know that events will simultaneously take place in the world in relationship with it. One thing that's very hard for human beings is to accept warnings. It's almost impossible for us to accept a warning of destruction. And this has happened over and over again. We plan on our lives for the future and our retirements. We plan for education, for school, and all this is as it should be. But at the same time, the warnings of a terrible destruction have been coming to us over and over again. On the little island of Pelee, the volcano was very active, and the radio and the news media were constantly telling the people of the danger that threatened them and urged them to get out of the town. But the people just couldn't imagine anything happening to their little town. And one morning, as one of the shopkeepers went and opened up his little shop, there was a tremendous roaring noise. He dove for the floor in his establishment, and in a moment he was writhing in agony with the superheat going across his back, burning his flesh. After a while, he stood up, and everything was dead quiet. And when he stepped out into a street, there was not a sound of a dog barking, a child playing, not a sound of anything. Everyone in the town was dead. 30,000 people. And friends, God has been sending warning after warning after warning, first to us as an Adventist people, and then to the world. They tried to warn about what Hitler was up to before the Second World War, but few people would pay attention. The result was a destruction of one of the highest cultures of the world, deterioration of Europe, and the slaughter of millions, 12 million people. All of these things, Ellen White tells us, she says that the fall of Jerusalem was just a faint shadow of what's to happen in the whole world. And then she says every battle is a shadow of the destruction that will take place at the end of time. We need to look back at these things and realize the reality of destruction, the reality of devastation. And right now I believe we're right on the verge of it. I don't believe there's much time left. In Ezekiel chapter 9, we get the picture of God first going through his church. Verse 4, and the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry, those who are so pure in heart that sin is hateful to them. And they hurt because the unfortunate immorality that exists in the church, those people are receiving the seal of the living God. And when the destruction goes forth, they will be preserved. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And he said unto me, defile the house and fill the courts with the slain. Go ye forth. And they went forth and slew in the city. And it came to pass while they were slaying them, and I was left, that I fell upon my face and cried and say, O God, wilt thou destroy all the residue of Israel and the pouring out of thy wrath. You see, the wickedness of Israel was so great that it appeared to the prophet that all of God's people were destroyed. But they were to start at the ancient men before the house, and Spirit of Prophecy, volume 5, on the chapter on the sealing. Every one of our people must read that chapter on the sealing in volume 5 of the testimonies. You must read that chapter. She says, these dumb dogs that would not bark are the first to feel the vengeance of an offended God. Men, women, and children all perish together. Study that chapter very carefully, because it's especially important to us as a people. When we look at Revelation chapter 14, we get a picture of those people who are sealed and the kind of character that they have before this awful destruction comes. First of all, we see them with Jesus on Mount Zion. They are totally locked in with their Savior. They identify so closely with Jesus that they are in vision symbolized as being with Him in heaven. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne of God and the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. They have an experience with Christ which no one else will ever have. These are they which were not defiled by women. They did not have any false doctrines, no confused doctrines, for they are virgins. They are absolutely pure of union with any other system of religion but the pure religion of the sanctuary. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever He goeth. They by faith have their eyes singled to the movements of Christ in the heavenly sanctuary. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God. They were that which God displayed before the world and the universe, and in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. A beautiful description of their, and I love the description of their mouth. In their mouth is found no guile. The words that flow from their mouths are the words of Christ. They're His. And you'll find only love and praising of God coming out of their mouths. What kind of people will they be? From the exterior, we know from the study of the sanctuary that they won't look any different from anybody else. They won't be attractive. And to the world, they'll be poor. To the world, there'll be nothing about these people that attracts attention. And yet inside the very glory of the Shekinah dwells. They will stand for the truth though the heavens fall. Men and women of moral integrity, they'll stand when champions are few, and they'll fight the fight that the reformers once fought for and shed their blood. We will be the remnant of those people who fought for truth through the centuries. The three angels' message is the movement that makes up this group. And we went through this, so I'm not going to go through this again now. The whole plan of the three angels' message is to raise up a people to so perfectly represent God's law that they'll stand out before the entire world as an absolutely perfect and peculiar people. And when I say perfect, don't get the confusion between perfectionism and the word that's used in the Bible for perfect. Perfectionism is the belief that I in my human flesh can produce perfection. We believe as Christians that we must die to ourselves, and Jesus lives His righteousness out in our life. We will so identify with our Savior that our words and thoughts and actions will be His and not our own. There followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen. I want you to realize, as you listen to different speakers, as different people study with you, the delineation of the message that we will give at the end of time is found in Great Controversy, page 606. If you want to put a ministry together, utilize that as the outline of your message with righteousness by faith. Great Controversy, page 606, is a message that she saw in vision that we would be giving at the end of time. It was pointing out the sins of Babylon, the dangers of religion and politics, the inroads of spiritualism, and the rapid growth of papal power. And that is it. That is the message we'll give right at the end. The entire Christian world will unite against us. They will unite with the political world to crush us out. And we will be a very small people at the end of time. Very small indeed. The major crisis that's brought out in the three angels' message, he says, these are our messages, nothing else is to allow to take our attention, is the concern over the great Sunday crisis and the false teachings of Babylon and the everlasting gospel. That's our message. Don't get outside that message. As long as we stay in this message, we speak with one united voice. Once we get outside of this message that God has specifically given, we atomize, we argue, and we are destroyed by the power of Satan that's trying to confuse us and destroy our message to the world. It is in the middle of this crisis over the mark of the beast that verse 12 takes place. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus Christ. I'm going to go past these next verses. At this point, John sees that beautiful sickle in the hand of Christ as 144,000 come to view, and the sealing is finished on the earth. At that time, Christ stands up in the heavenly sanctuary. There the mediation ends, and he prepares to come to the earth. And while he's preparing, the plagues are falling upon this earth. Plagues in a time of trouble like never has been or ever shall be again. In Revelation chapter 15, we read in verse 6, "And the 7 angels came out of the temple, having 7 plagues, clothed in pure and white linen, and having their breasts girded with a golden girdle." These angels come forth, and under the direction of God, they pour out his wrath on the earth, and there's absolutely no mediation in behalf of mankind. And the horror of those moments cannot be estimated today. Listen, even the wicked that die in this world under terrible conflagration still have the mediation of Christ. Christ lighteth every man that cometh into the world, but that light will be removed at that time. And the awful sense of emptiness and sorrow and woe and misery that comes after probation closes. And it's going to be far worse for the Adventist than any whirlwind, because he knows exactly what's transpiring. The sense of guilt, the sense of loss is overwhelming to him. One of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels these vials of God's wrath. And look at verse 8. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God. Remember last night we talked about that mediation in the sanctuary. And the sanctuary filling with smoke more and more and more as the day commenced. And precisely is what's happening in this symbolism here. When these angels go forth, it says no man will go into that temple until the plagues are poured out. Symbolizing the close of probation, and not until the judgments are poured out will God come and take his people and bring them into the heavenly courts. And I heard a great voice coming out of heaven saying to the 7 angels, "Go your way, then pour out the vials of wrath of God upon the earth." And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as blood of a dead man. And the third poured out his vial upon the rivers, the fountains of waters, and they became blood. Now when you read through this in the book Great Controversy, these are presented as absolutely literal plagues, like the plagues that fell upon Egypt. When we look at this picture, I don't know how well you can see it in all this light, but these boats are out in the ocean, and they're among water that's absolutely blood red. What will happen to the sea when the water turns red? We know the creatures in the sea are going to die. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers, the fresh water, the drinking water. And I heard the angel of the water say, "Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and wast and shall be, because thou hast judged. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy." Imagine when the fresh waters are blood and nothing to drink for the inhabitants of the earth. You can survive in drinking blood, and there will be survivors. But it'll be a horrible time. And like I said, my prayer is that this should raise compassion in our hearts as we realize these sweet people out there, just knowing the plagues that are about to come. If we were half awake to what is about to happen, and we go stand in a park someplace and look at the mothers with their children and the people, totally not knowing what's about to come upon them, it puts a tremendous burden on us to become involved in missionary work. The fourth angel poured out his vial on the sun, and the power was given the sun to scorch men, and we're scorched with a great heat. What will happen when no water comes and the sun hits with a great heat, and the crops dry up and animals begin to die, and millions of people lose their life because of thirst and starvation? Those people don't know what's about to come upon them, but we do. The fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seed of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues and blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and they repented not. The seed of the beast is far bigger now than it was before. Remember, it was a dragon, Rome, that gave the papacy its seat, its power, and great authority. But now in Revelation 17, it says that she sits on nations and multitudes and peoples and tongues. Somehow a terrible darkness is going to cover that part of the world, and a terrible destruction, so horrible that it will be hard to comprehend. And in it all, men will gnaw their tongues for pain, and they'll continue to blaspheme God throughout the horror of those days. And the sixth angel was poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. The kings of the east, friends, are clearly I believe by the next verse, in fact, talking about the kings of the east, it says, and then I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and the false prophet, for they are the spirits of devils. It may very well be that the kings of the east represent the flood of the Eastern occult religion taking over the Western world after Christianity has lost its influence over the masses. The river Euphrates was the lifeblood of Babylon, and Babylon is the name of fallen Christianity in the prophecies of Revelation. The lifeblood is the people believing in that religion. When people give up the doctrines and reject it, then that religion deteriorates and dies. And when you look into Catholicism, as men become more enlightened and the truth about it goes before the world, I believe that people will lose interest in these archaic doctrines of the Dark Ages. You see, in much of the world today, they are still in the Dark Ages. And it's those areas that are unenlightened that are the real backbone of the Roman Catholic Church. At the time of the French Revolution, the system of Eastern religion, which was the atheism of Pharaoh, the ancient worship of the force, the psychic religions that is happening in the New Age today, resulted in a virtual slaughter of the Roman Catholic priests on the streets of France. This book, Gurry's Doctrine of the Jesuits, has in the back of it a description of a horrible sight that was discovered in Mexico, at the Catholic University in Mexico, at the church there. It says they searched the university buildings and the Church of Bethlehem, which is connected with them, and underneath the church in the hidden cellar they found a gruesome situation with an officer as a guide. I went down by the trapdoor and concealed stairway to a subterranean vault where the light of the candle, he showed me hundreds of skulls of men, women, and children, bones of all kinds, portions of human remains with flesh and hair still clinging to them, bodies which have been cut up, packed in small boxes, covered with quicklime and concealed in the wall, buried in the floor, great piles of dirt and bones which have been dug up in one part and piled in another to make way for new interment. It was horrible. It was awful. Up above was the beautifully decorated Roman Catholic Church with its gold leaf and so on and so forth. Friends, I believe one day the horror of this system will be stripped aside and the world, hating Christianity, will destroy, and the Western world will fall with it. He says in this, the 6th plague, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth. Remember, the mouth is a symbol of legislation or passing laws or legislative body. And working through the legislation of the main powers of the world, spirits will carry on a tremendous activity. It says the dragon, the pagan world, out of the mouth of the beast, the Catholic world, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, the Western Protestant world. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles which go forth to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. We're watching that take place right now. And Jesus says at the end of this event, this gathering together of the world through this spiritualistic movement, it says, "Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garment, lest he walk naked, and they see the shame." John saw the entire world wrapped up in devil worship. Maybe in vision, he saw the movements taking place today, the rise of witchcraft and humanism throughout the systems of the world. He saw the rise of Satanism and the movement of spiritualism through the ranks of Protestantism, the movement of Protestant spiritualism through the legislative bodies of the lands, and the binding together of all the churches for their lobbying in the various legislatures throughout the different countries. He must have seen the movement in the pagan world of the return to the masters of wisdom or beings coming in flying saucers to this earth. Satan manifesting as Christ and the entire scenario that's described for us in the great controversy in the time of trouble. The entire world seduced by Satan and finally even destroying Christianity and one great religion existing at the end of the 6th plague to confront Christ, the religion of Lucifer throughout the whole earth. And God's people will become the objects of universal hatred because we alone will not accept this bondage of false teaching. And he gathered them together in a place called, in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. And we know that it's very clear that the word means a gathering together in the high places for war. And it's something that's to happen all over the world simultaneously. In great controversy we read about the deliverance of God's people from this decree of death. The 7th angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." And that takes place at the coming of Christ. Just as God's people are about to be put to death, Jesus' voice rumbles from the heavens through the earth, and a great earthquake takes place. And all who have died in the three angels' message rise to stand with the 144,000. Verse 18, "And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings. There was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great." We read that the great city was divided. The whole earth is called Babylon at that time. "And the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And then a terrible hail fell upon man, these hailstones weighing 60 pounds apiece. The surface of the earth will be entirely destroyed at that time. There'll not be a dwelling. There'll be absolutely nothing left, no roads, nothing. The forests will be flattened. The whole world will become one place of terrible and mass destruction. Absolutely nothing left. Another description of the coming of Jesus, and I'm just going to go through these real fast. Jesus seen riding upon horses, symbolically representing the movement of Christ and his angels coming to this earth in the great battle of Armageddon to deliver his people. And a great angel is seen in the sun, standing there, calling for the birds to come and to eat the flesh of every human being on this earth. And in the midst of that, it says that the beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire, but it never mentions that the dragon is thrown in, because Satan is cast out of the grave like an abominable branch. We understand, not to be joined with his brethren in burial. Every human being is destroyed. Now, I believe the issues taking place in the human arena, the wars and bloodshed, violence of human passions that takes place at the time of the plagues, is represented by those trumpets of Revelation chapter 8 through 11. And I know that's a very difficult area for a lot of people. But I take a precedence out of Revelation chapter 16, verses 13 and 14, where John tells us the sixth plague. But in describing the sixth plague, he starts historically in the past, and he brings us up to the event to take place after the close of probation. If you apply that precedence to each one of the trumpets, friends, then you see a primary fulfillment in the future with a historical message in the passage of where it began and what issue it is, and we see that issue fulfilled at the end of time. And I'm comfortable with that. Problem is, Ellen White made it clear there was a support for the historical view of the trumpets when she supported Josiah Litch's conclusion that the Ottoman Empire would fall August 11, 1840. And it was perfectly fulfilled. She says it was a fulfillment of prophecy. At the same time, she's talking about the time of trouble, and she says that trumpet after trumpet and vial after vial will be poured out one after another on the inhabitants of the earth. Another place, she said, 7 angels stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets, and they went forth to pour the judgments of God out upon the earth. So we have to see the primary application of the trumpets after the close of probation. But we can go back in history and see which issues will reach a climax to judge the world at the end of time. Now let's look at these for a minute. Chapter 8, verse 3. Another angel came and stood at the golden altar. Only the high priest could minister at the golden altar. It must be Jesus. Having a golden censer, only the priest ministered high priest ministered that censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of the saints as your final mediation in behalf of mankind on the day of atonement. The golden altar which was before the Lord, and the smoke of the incense which came up with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And this angel, now that in Christ Object Lessons, the censer is called the censer of truth. See, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And only as we read the Bible and the inspiration of truth comes into our heart can we grasp by faith those things that are available to us from Christ's ministration. But when there is a famine for truth in the land, as the Bible tells us at the end of time, there is no truth in the Bible for men reading it. They can read that Bible from beginning to end, but the conviction of truth never comes into their hearts, and they're empty. There's no more mediation of the Spirit of Christ in their behalf. The first angel sounded, wait a minute, verse 5, and the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. in the earthly sanctuary service after the Day of Atonement ceremonies came to an end, the priest took the censer out of the most holy place and brought it to the court. And this is a perfect representation of the end of mediation. And then the trumpets begin. And the seventh angel, which had the seven trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burned up. Now, I'm not going to go through these. You guys are acquainted with the text of the book of Revelation. You better be. That's the foundation of our teachings, is prophecy, we understand. But as we go through these different descriptions of the first four plagues, we're just immersed in an amazing symbolism that is very difficult to unravel without some sort of guidance to understand it. But traditionally, our views of these were that it was the Teutonic invasions of Europe that destroyed the world of imperial Rome that had accepted imperial Christianity and began to persecute true Christianity, or the church in the wilderness. When that took place, God ceased to hold up the Roman world as the ruler of the world and allowed it to deteriorate with the various barbarian invasions of Europe. Now I have to think for a minute, what were these barbarian invasions? First of all and foremost, a large number of them were Sabbath-keeping Christian organizations. The Vandals were Christians. They kept the seventh-day Sabbath. The Goths were largely Christians and kept the seventh-day Sabbath. And we find that the Gauls were Christians, and many of them kept the seventh-day Sabbath. And it goes on like that through a large number of them. But there were others who didn't keep the Sabbath, who were literally pagans and worshiped the pagan gods of Northern Europe. This religion of Northern European witchcraft has stayed in the Roman Empire from that time on. And it has always been within the culture of these European tribes. That very form of witchcraft was accepted by Hitler, and Hitler's belief is almost verbatim the religion of the New Age movement today. You see, what took place back then is still here to judge mankind and be a scourge upon us at the end of time. The New Age movement is the portent that's in a process of destroying the earth. Europe broke down into over 20 countries, not just 10 countries, but over 20 countries. And the large majority of these people were occult worshipers. And the tension between these various racial or family backgrounds is still tension in Europe today. When we look at the horrors of war that Europe has gone into, realizing those tensions, religious and political, are still there. And Europe, between East and West, is a seething pot of hatred. You go stand on the border between Eastern and West Berlin. Just go and stand there. Go through that line. Go stand in that and look through the museum at Checkpoint Charlie at the people that have been shot and butchered as they tried to get across that fence to their family. And you realize that there are problems here that can never be cured. There are problems between East and West that will never be cured at that time. The suffering of Europe is still a suffering. The hatred of Europe is still there today, and God only is holding it back. And this trumpet will be finally released completely after the close of probation. But at that time, it's going to affect the entire world. The whole world is going to come into a conflagration because of the differences between the ideologies of Eastern and Western Europe. America is part of the ideology of Western Europe today, the Christian and Protestant empire. And right now, America is not being alert to her enemies. She has woken up in the last few years. When I went over the borders from West Germany into East Germany, all along the borders, from the train, you could see just large collections of tanks along that border, just ready to go into motion at any time. In any 8-day period, they could take over Europe. But when it happens, friends, it's going to be a war all over the world as communism and Western thought are clashing everywhere. Now, when we go to chapter 9, we're describing another movement, not just the problems and ideologies and difficulties that arose with the Teutonic invasions and the breakdown of Europe. than the resulting situation we have today. But you're looking at something else. You're looking at that power that God used to judge the Eastern Roman Empire under imperial Christianity. And friends, that power was the rise of Mohammedanism. There is no doubt about it all. The Muslim invasions fulfill that historical prophecy. Now I'm going to go rapidly through these things. John said he saw locusts. And we've always accepted the idea that these warriors, these bands of Muslims coming out of the desert, have fulfilled this. They came out by the thousands and thousands. There had not been unity before Mohammedan arose as their prophet. And then just overnight they came out of the deserts like a great cloud of locusts and bombarded the walls of Europe. They conquered much of Spain. They conquered all the way up to Italy. Much of Europe came under the influence of the Muslims. It was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And it was given to them that they should hurt men for 5 months. Now let's look at the fulfillment of this prophecy of not being able to hurt those who have the seal of God and the grass of the trees. When the Arabian tribes gathered for the conquest of Syria, AD 632, Muhammad's uncle Abu Bakr was succeeded by the prophet after his death, gave this following order, which fits the Bible prophecy exactly. When you fight the battles of the Lord, acquit yourselves like men, without turning your backs, but let not your victory be stained with the blood of men, of women, or children. Destroy no palm trees, nor burn any fields of corn, cut down no fruit trees, nor do any mischief to cattle, only such as you kill to eat. Destroy no palm trees, nor burn any fields of corn, cut down no fruit trees, nor do any mischief to cattle, only such as you kill to eat. When you make a covenant or an article, stand by it, and be as good as your word. As you go on, you will find some religious persons who live retired in monasteries and propose themselves to serve God in that way. You see, the Muslims were educated by, or the Saracens, the heads of the Muslim world, were educated by the Assyrian and the Syrian church, which was a Sabbath-keeping Adventist church. And these were the highest culture in the world at that time, and they were the educators of the Mohammedans and lived on a peaceful level with the Prophet and with Abu Bakr. And so when these men went out from the Muslim world to destroy imperial Christianity in Rome, they protected the Sabbath-keeping Christians. Isn't that amazing? And then it goes on to say, and you will find another sort of people that belong to the synagogue of Satan, who have shaven crowns. Be sure you cleave their skulls and give them no quarter till they either turn Mohammedans or pay tribute. That was the monks of the Roman Catholic Church. Why were they calling them the synagogue of Satan? They were educated by the Sabbath-keeping Christians, you see. A very interesting way that history represents this. Now, this thing here, you already believe this is the 150 days, or the 5 months, 150 days, or 150 years of the prophecy, the first part of the Muslim invasions. It was on the 27th of July in the year 1299 of the Christian era that Othman first invaded the territory of Nicomedia. And the singular accuracy of the date seemed to disclose some foresight of the rapid and destructive growth of the monster. Starting from this date, we count the 150 years, or our 5 months in prophecy, and this brings us to AD 1449. During these 150 years, the Ottoman Empire engaged in almost continual warfare against the Greek Empire. They did not conquer it until 1449, when the last of the Greek empires, and I'm sorry, the slide has dropped down a little bit, but the last of the Greek empires and the family of the Constantines only went into the throne by permission of the ruler of the Ottoman Empire, perfectly fulfilling that prophecy. This world that basically rejected the religion of Jehovah, that the God of its name was Apollyon or Abaddon, the destroyer and the exterminator. Now when the sixth angel released its trumpet, it loosed the 4 angels which were bound in the great river Euphrates. It says, and the 4 angels were loosed which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. When we go ahead and study out the hour, the day, the month, and the year in prophecy, we discover that it perfectly fits The period of time from the time that Constantine took the throne to the time that the ruler of the Ottoman Empire submitted his authority to the heads of Europe. Absolutely perfectly fulfilling that prophecy. Now let me skip by these. We know that the Arab warriors were the first ones to use gunpowder and rifles in warfare, fulfilling the prophecy of smoke proceeding out of the mouth and out of the tails. And here's that prophecy, the 391 years. You can study all these things out in Uriah Smith's material and Haskell and all of the early fellows who wrote on these prophecies. But I want you to know that the Muslim world just didn't disappear, did it? The Muslim world did not disappear. The facts are that it is in a... Oh, that's awful kind of you. The facts are that it is just as much and more a danger today than it ever was in history. The religion of the Muslim world is a Messianic religion, a belief that they must conquer all of the religions for Allah. And that the greatest thing that you could ever do in your life is to give your life dying in behalf of Allah. These things are still there in their religion. Nothing has changed in that religion. And friends, they are all over the world. And they're the seed of much of the terrorism that's taking place today. And the world is agitated over this. Many of these countries are trying desperately to get a hold of the atomic bomb. And friends, when they do, the first place it's going to go up in smoke is Israel. But before Israel goes up in smoke, a lot more is going to go up in smoke than that. You know, the United States is carrying out an interesting and ancient plan designed by a man named Albert Pike, the great Pope of Masonry. Before the turn of the century, he laid out a plan in the 1870s for the destruction of the world through 3 world wars. The First World War was to be fomented in Europe, and the goal of it was to open up Palestine for the migration of the Jews back to their homeland. The Second World War was to be fought, and at the end of it, it was to result somehow in establishing the Jews in their own state. And when you see the millions of the Jews that were destroyed and the sympathy towards the Jewish people and their desire to flee Europe and go back to their homeland, which had already been saddled because of the events that took place in Europe earlier, you begin to get a picture of what was taking place behind the scenes. And the Third World War was to be fought when the internationalists had built up Israel to a high military power and also built up the Arab nations and maintained the balance between those two powers. And then they would cause conditions of war, and the whole world would be on one side or other of that conflict. And friends, we're on the borders of that right now. The U.S. has been selling arms to the Arabian countries as well as the Soviet Union. And we think for a minute about this. Yes, they're developing very rapidly, and there's so many millions of them. How in the world can those few million Israelis stand out against them? But the Israeli scientists are the ones that are largely responsible for the new innovations of warfare. We find out not long ago when the Muslims sent jets in to just bomb the Israelis, they lost 70% of their jets that they sent in, and Israel lost absolutely nothing in the fight. Israel has advanced technology that keeps a constant balance between the two. But Israel has a different view today. If for some reason they think they're about to be destroyed, the concept is not the Masada complex that existed in the past, where they would kill themselves. But the concept is the Samson complex today, expressed by one of their own generals. If they go down, they're going to take everybody with them. They're going to take everybody with them. You see, this Muslim issue has never died. And only by the grace of a loving God has it been held back. And when God withdraws His Spirit, then again the trumpets will blow and destruction upon destruction will come. And when it comes, friends, the technology for destruction today is so overwhelming. Let's look back at Hiroshima and get an example maybe of what could happen throughout the world. This was the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. When this bomb dropped, 100,000 people died. Over 30,000 died shortly afterwards because of the burns and the radiation. And then with the bomb dropped on Nagasaki, within a few days, 200,000 people had lost their lives. Could you keep your eye on that for me, Ron, when those... No. Just punch on the projector to let the slide down. There you go. When you look at Hiroshima from the sky, you see total and absolute devastation. This same type of devastation took place in Europe, and you can look at pictures between what took place in Europe and what took place in Hiroshima. Bombing night after night, day after day, until whole cities were flattened. But the difference is that only a few ounces of radioactive material released did all the destruction that thousands of tons of bombs had done on the cities of Europe. And that bomb, friends, that bomb was a very small bomb. The warheads today are from 70 to 150 times the size of that bomb in destruction. And there's at least 3 of them for every major city in the United States. And 13 of these bombs can fit in one warhead. And these are smart bombs. As they're released from the warhead, they're guided by a computer to go right to that city, and they can land within 100 feet of their target. Technology today has gone so far beyond what we can even imagine. The Japanese look back on it today and call it the place of suffering. They find that the heat of that bomb was 6,000 degrees centigrade on the ground level below the brilliant blast. Those people were lucky that were vaporized, because others died a slow and agonizing death as their body tissues broke down. The description of the suffering of these people, the incurable disease that they had, is absolutely nauseating. It describes the breaking down of their tissues, the hair falling out, blood oozing from their skin and not stopping, nausea, vomiting, and eventually convulsions and death. But look at the description of the plague that will come at the end in Zechariah chapter 12. It says, "And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouth." These poor folks, as they stood there in that flash of light, just for a moment, that flash of heat was so intense that their bodies were immediately cooked while they stood on their feet. And this one fellow is describing here, it says the people in the river couldn't move. He went down there to help them. They had dove into the river when their bodies felt the intense heat. And while they were laying in there in the river, too weak to move, he got his boat and he reached down to pick them up, and their flesh came off in big glove-like pieces in his hands. Their bodies were absolutely cooked, and he was so nauseated he had to stop what he was doing. Another description is of a Jesuit priest in Japan trying to bring water back to a group that were suffering. And he was making his way through a park. It says, on his way back with the water, he got lost on a detour around a fallen tree trunk. And as he looked for his way through the woods, he heard a voice ask from the underbrush, "Have you anything to drink?" He saw a uniform. Thinking there was just one soldier, he approached with the water. When he had penetrated the bushes, he saw there was about 20 men, and they were all in exactly the same nightmarish state. Their faces were wholly burned, their eye sockets were hollow, the fluid from their melted eyes had run down their cheeks. They had looked up when the bomb went off, and it had exploded the moisture in their eyes. And if a mouth is open at that time, it'll destroy the tongue as well. And goes on to describe, we find another description at the end of time, and there's many descriptions. Go through the book of Isaiah and Jeremiah on the day of the Lord and look at the descriptions of the destruction that is to come. It says, the songs of the temple shall be howlings in that day, saith the Lord God. There shall be many dead bodies in every place. And notice this, they shall cast them forth in silence. It's an interesting prophecy, isn't it? Now look what happened. It says there were dead bodies everywhere. There was practically no place for me to put my feet on the floor. After a while, they were just like objects or goods that we handled in a very business-like way. It goes on to say, and an old woman lay near me with an expression of suffering on her face, but she made no sound. Indeed, one thing was common to everyone I saw, complete silence. What had happened was so horrible that it didn't even bear crying over. There was absolutely no sound to be made. Everything I saw made a deep impression on me. A park nearby covered with dead bodies waited to be cremated. Very badly injured people evacuated in my direction. The most impressive thing I saw were some girls, very young girls, not only with their clothes torn off, but with their skin peeled off as well. And when you think about this for a minute, what I'm showing this to you for Ellen White tells us over and over again with tears coming to our eyes that the cities are to be destroyed, and give them warn them, she says. Evangelize, evangelize, evangelize. She's pled with our people through the years of her career for us to warn the people about what's about to happen to them. And they're facing this with no faith. You and I could make it through a crisis like that because we know the future. We know that heaven is beyond. But these people have nothing beyond. And when these things happen, they go out of their minds. It describes here on this page, on this book on the effects of the bomb, that after the bomb, clumps of smoke began to rise. Fires caused smoke to rise into the heavens, and before long there was great drops of water about the size of marbles, black, brackish water falling everywhere, covering everything with a black film. It was filled with radioactive dust, and if this water was to get on you at all, it would cause terrible burns, and everyone had to try to get in out of the rain. But the people didn't know. They were walking around blindly in this black rain in the darkness, and their skin was being covered with radioactivity, and terrible burns were forming on their body. And then after that, you want to see if you can get, oh, it's there, sorry. Okay, after that, what happens is the dust that went up higher in the atmosphere begins to settle down, and it looks like snow, like ash. And it's falling down, and wherever that lands again, it causes more burns, and it covers the ground, and it looks almost like a gray, snowed landscape, and everything around you, as far as you can see, is gray, covered with this mucky film from this ash-like snow that falls. And overhead, the sky becomes literally black, and it's a dark day. The Bible says it'll be a day of darkness. It says that 2 minutes after 11 o'clock on the morning of August 9th, that was the next day, the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and it was days before the people in Hiroshima knew anything about it. Because when this happens, first of all, when the atomic bomb goes off, there's what's called an electromagnetic pulse. There's a blast of the subatomic particles burst and go out in tremendous speed, the speed of light. And among those particles are particles called photons. And as photons go out, they take the electricity with it, just like light going through a fluorescent, electricity going through a fluorescent light. And all of the electrical equipment stop. Radios don't work. Car batteries don't work. The electricity in your house don't work. Generators won't generate electricity. There is no electricity. And so you're just totally cut off. And I want you to go home to your house, and I want you to think about how dependent on electricity you are. And that telephone, you want to try to call someone? No communication. No radio communication. No television communication. Friends, when it happens, it's the end of the world for you. And the rest of the world ceases to exist. This is the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, just a handful, just a few ounces of radioactive material released. And terrible, terrible destruction took place. Now here's what happens when a bomb goes off. There's a tremendous ball of light, like Ellen White saw in vision, bursting over the city in a flash. If you're looking at it when it goes off, you can lose your eyes. If you're further away, it'll stretch out your retinas, and they'll stay that way permanently, and you'll be blind. And then there's the electromagnetic pulse, and after that a tremendous shock wave goes out, and with that shock wave comes intense heat. But it can't burn right away. It burns the air. The oxygen is burnt as it blows out, and then it creates a tremendous vacuum, and there's a tremendous convulsive return of a rushing air and electricity. Once that comes back in, then everything within a certain area is so hot that it immediately bursts into flame. The flames rage. There's nothing, absolutely nothing to stop it. And it sends up the radioactive dust up into the heavens and creates a dark day over the top. But the bombs today are so superior. To those bombs, there's absolutely no comparison to it. If 10% of the bombs are released that are available today, no life will exist on this planet. Only 10%. You know, Russia is planning on a thermonuclear war in 1988. They're planning on that for the United States. Australia will just go communist. It's already moving in that direction. There won't even be a fight here. So you're fortunate. And the filth of those bombs will affect the atmosphere in the northern hemisphere. but it'll take a month or more, maybe 2 months for it to get down and to affect you down here. So you folks may have a little more time to think about things than we will up there when these things start to happen. But they can be launched from a ship, they can be dropped from the air, they can be released from underneath a city, they can be released in many different ways, and atomic bombs can be used in different ways to create death and destruction. One way is the explosions can be set off in a pattern for several miles, and that pattern of convulsion underneath the surface of the earth will continue to flow and cause a terrible earthquake in a location designated. When the fellow that developed, Dr. Cohen, developed this neutron bomb, the reason that they developed it was they noticed that when they blew up the hydrogen bomb, it was the blast of neutrons was many, many times greater than that of the atomic bomb. When the H bomb went off, it was a much more powerful bomb than they ever could have imagined. But they tried to develop nuclear warfare for regular battlefield circumstances. The U.S. government wanted nothing to do with it. They did all the research they were supposed to do, but when they brought the research to the United States government, the government said, no, we want nothing to do with it. From now on, we're only going to develop atomic warfare for peaceful means. And that was the desire of the United States. But what happened is wealthy Jews in that country laid a plot to sell that weapon to the Soviet Union. And the most terrible, terrible race for weapons has begun. And it won't end until this world is destroyed. You know, it says that Jesus comes to destroy those who destroy the earth. But he points out this neutron bomb could be used and could save a lot of lives. But he says politically, our government wants nothing to do with it and doesn't know how to deploy it. It's used it only for political purposes. And he says, number two, Europe will not let us deploy it there. And number three, if we try to deploy it, it will be an advanced technology over Russia. They will not be able to match. It will give us a strategic advantage. And before they ever allow that to happen, they will release nuclear war upon us. Very similar situation to what's happening with the SDI today, with Russia trying desperately to get the U.S. to stop before they deploy that. They may start a war before we put that into operation. They found that they can send electromagnetic energy into the atmosphere and alter the high super streams of air and actually change weather patterns. And this has already been carried out time and time again. Russia is 15 years ahead of us in beam warfare, particle beam warfare. Now, this page I'm going to read to you. Nuclear weapons are only part of man's mass annihilation arsenal. Nerve gas, while not as ostentatious, noisy, or spectacular as the H-bomb, can be just as lethal. A minuscule 10 milligrams of nerve agent sarin, if sprayed over a 10 cubic meter area, will dispatch a man within 10 minutes. Even more potent is the agent known as VX. One small drop on the skin quickly turns a person into a quivering, uncontrollable, nauseated spastic. Death comes within minutes unless immediate treatment is available. All it would take would be one airplane, the right wind conditions, a heavily populated metropolitan area, and millions of people would gasp their last wondering what hit them. You don't even need an atomic bomb anymore, or all the technology or money to produce that atomic bomb. Even more effective are the biological agents. Botulinus toxin is one of the more potent examples. A microscopic dose, either inhaled or ingested, brings on excruciating death within 6 hours. A few pounds would be more than enough to dispatch the entire world's population if uniformly dispersed. Botulism is only one of the many diseases that can be spawned by germ warfare, and it lists a whole bunch of diseases that right now are available in warfare. And you see, when the war goes, and these people are desperate to win that war, they will use everything they can. Disease, earthquake, weather warfare, particle beams weapons blasting on our cities, and atomic bombs. And you can see the portent for what can happen when God withdraws His Spirit from human hearts. Today we find that there's a tremendous proliferation of nuclear war among countries that are unstable. And the major world powers have have tried desperately to keep some sort of balance of power. But the United States found from the time of the Carter administration, when we tried to accept this idea of peaceful negotiation and began to deteriorate our nuclear stock, Russia started a crash program and so outstripped us that we were in danger of having to face the reality of accepting Russia's control over our country by simply capitulating, because there was no way that we had a deterrent. Right now, we are spending 10 times as much to arm other countries than we are our own, to try to maintain a balance of power in that world out there. Much of the United States economy is going into armaments today. Do you realize that we have the highest peacetime budget for armaments that has ever existed? And it's even outstripping the budgets that were available for wartime economy. We're in the middle of a third world war today. There are 40 wars or more going on in the world out there. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying in wars around this world, and it's a war between East and West. But if you look at the countries, they're arming for war. They're terrified. They know that something is about to happen. The thinkers in this world are looking to the future and realizing the desperate condition they're in. In the book, The Arms Bazaar, we're given the psychology of the arms race. It goes way back in history, and it shows the effort of the British Empire to produce a new warring weapon called a Gatling gun. They thought once they produced this Gatling gun, it would end all wars. But what found is that somebody else came out with a better Gatling gun. And so the race has been on between one armament company and another. And those armament countries need wars to test their equipment. And the day and age in which we live now, the largest financial institutions revolve around these armament companies, where one item, a jet, can be 40, 50, $100 million. One of the bombers could be $1 billion. In the high technology. And because of this, they have their own international intelligence program. There are governments within themselves. And if they need a war, they can cause a small war in order to be able to show the killing capacity of their equipment. Each one of the major wars has proved to be a tremendous financial boom for the makers of armaments in this country or in the world. And I was amazed at going through some of the magazines that are sent to these various countries, and it just advertises all of these different modern equipment of war and describing the killing capacity and the amount of destruction that each one could cause, but always coining the phrases in very modern technology that doesn't sound like you're hurting anything. It's amazing how they can change the language to fit. But the technology of warfare is so advanced today. And one thing he explained is just like the used car salesman. You know, these car factories have all kinds of technological things developed already, and they don't release the new technology all at one time. They wait, and then the next year they add just a little bit more of what they've developed. And then the next year, so that you have to keep getting a new one all the time. And so what they do is they come up with a special technology, they put it out on the market, the wealthier powers get it, and all of the other powers borrow money to get it too. And when everybody's got that, then they come out with the next step. And they know that they can keep their armament buildup of funds going as long as they handle this in a very business-like way. But they can see at night, you can't hide from it all. There are all types of different ways of locating an individual, a plane, or an enemy. In an article called The Battlefield of the 1990s, it said that helicopters will monitor the battlefields. These helicopters will be produced by the hundreds of thousands and moving through the air. From the sea and from the land, everybody is in close connection. They know exactly what's going on. The new warfare is electronic in nature with absolute and perfect communication. The helicopter was proved to be in Indochina the master of killing. The tremendous capacity of these things. You know, one thing, I saw a picture, and it showed one of these helicopters, and every so many bullets that come out is called a tracer bullet. And these tracer bullets, it looks like hair or string hanging down from the helicopters as the bullets move from place to place. And you can see the destruction on the ground, and you just see these tracer bullets going out from it. And what these men can do in that helicopter is all they have to do is look at their target and push the button, and they destroy whatever they're looking at. Anything they look at is immediately destroyed. They can fly across a crowd of people, and they can go through that crowd and look at the individuals that they want to kill. Just look at them and punch the button as they look, and just go right through that crowd and kill everybody they want to with 90% accuracy. 10% of the people that are innocent would be destroyed too. But it shows that this is the machine of the future. The ability to move rapidly from one country to another and to escape radar technology is amazing. This is one of the latest jets produced by the United States. And it's made of plastic, a plastic with a metal paint over it. And both of these things absorb radar. It also has a cooling device so that the jet stream coming out the back of it will be cool, so it can't be picked up on heat sensors. And it has a muffler in it that it flies quietly, so it can't be picked up by sound either. And Russia is very, very much afraid of the new bomber that's just been developed and is in deployment now in the United States. But that's only what's on the outside. That was what was published in the news media. We have no idea the nature of the technology within that aircraft. We know right now that there are computer chips that are in use in the military that are 250 times the efficiency of the computer chips that makes a computer out of your watch. So we have no idea what's available today. We talk about the smart bombs that know just where to go, and the cruise bombers that can fly over the convolutions of the earth by the careful programming that's in them. But notice that almost every major country of the world has armaments that it sells, and it's an important part of their economy. Each one of these shows a different company, Sweden and so on. When this war goes, everything is going to go with it. Now listen, the USSR is the only country which has studied fighting and winning a nuclear war. The Russians see nuclear war not as unthinkable, not as an end of human existence, but as presenting opportunities, if necessary, to force the capitulation of the United States and its allies, the occupation of their territories, and their absorption into a new Russian empire. In a planned series of meetings, discussions, and publications from 1956 until approximately 1962, the Soviet Union did a total ground-up reevaluation of military doctrine, strategy, and military art for a coming Third World War with the United States and its allies, in which it was thought that the nuclear weapons, especially nuclear-tipped rockets of all sorts, would be the main means of destruction. Now notice, their philosophy is different than that of the United States. The U.S. doctrine of escalation places nuclear strike as the last fateful act of a war. The Soviets, on the contrary, make massive nuclear strikes as the very first act of World War III. As Nikita Khrushchev said in 1960, war will begin not as it did in the past by invasions of frontier, not by rocket strikes deep into the interior, not by a single capital. No large industrial or administrative center, no strategic area will remain intact in the very first minutes, let alone days, of nuclear war. Now, you folks have a problem here in Australia because strategically you're one of the most important locations for the U.S. military communications in case of a nuclear war. And they're going to want to take out this area of communication down here. When is their schedule for war? In the Executive Intelligence Review we read, in remarks delivered during the first week of June, Folha de Sao Paulo, Brazil, June 2, Cuba's Fidel Castro announced 1988 doomsday for the United States. Those who attempt to ignore Castro's statements as just more communist propaganda are very, very foolish people. In an outburst of the sort for which Fidel Castro has long been famous, he blurts out publicly the date at which Moscow plans to win thermonuclear war against the United States before the end of 1988. It is no longer a secret that Moscow is now engaged in a crash program preparations to launch total thermonuclear war as a surprise attack on the United States by no later than 1988. And I first discovered that fact during May 1983 and reported by now massively corroborated findings and forecast to appropriate officials. The highest levels of NATO intelligence community in Europe agree, as many leading members of the USA's intelligence community also agree privately. When we see these angels holding back the winds of strife, we should, every time we read that passage, say, thank God for a little more time to finish the work of warning those poor folks out there that don't know what's coming. We should be pleading with God for a little more time so we can reach these people that are about to go to Christless graves. When these bombs are released, it's too late. We know that at any time, you see, all across the Midwest of the United States are bomb silos. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them going through the states of the Midwest, out in the farm fields there. Every one of those silos is pinpointed by a bomb in Russia. It takes 30 minutes for the bombs to get back and forth between the two. If at any point they detect a bomb has been released from either one side or other, the other has a strategy of trying to destroy the rest of the silos as soon as possible so the bombs can't come back over. So in the event that it starts, all the bombs on both sides are released at the same time. There's not going to be just a little release. And I tell you again, the scientists have estimated if only 10% of the bombs are released, in time all life on this planet would be destroyed. But we look at the pictures that are given to our view in Revelation, and we see the destruction of trees, burning, and no one can put them out, and no one can stop it. You talk about people now in these great movements to try to save a few species of plants and causing all kinds of commotions over that. There aren't going to be any plants left before long. Nothing is going to be left. This is what the forests may look like when this whole conflagration is over throughout the earth. No living green thing. Talks about some terrible event happening in the sea, and what could take place? It says the sea will become like the blood of the dead man. The animals in the sea will perish. And as you look at the description of the bomb, as a small portion of even a small portion of this nuclear ash goes up into the higher atmospheres, it blocks out the sun, and the temperatures drop on this planet. And in some parts of the northern hemisphere, it'll drop as much as 50 degrees below zero, solid freezing in time. And eventually, the entire world will enter into nuclear winter, and life will never be the way it was before, if there's any survivors at all. The oceans will start freezing out from the land, and animals will die, and they'll just continue to die out into the ocean. A tremendous amount of study was done by the Canadian government in league with the Japanese to produce a study and a documentary showing the dangers of nuclear war. When they did that study and they worked in coalition with scientists in Russia, they produced a scenario that was far more horrible than any of them could have ever imagined. And in every instance where scientists have tried to calculate the destruction of a bomb before it went off, they always found it to be far more destructive than all their calculations. They just cannot totally measure it. The earth itself will become one vast laser house of destruction, death, disease. And remember, these bombs cause earthquakes. They cause terrible storms when they take place. The movement of wind causes the movement of electromagnetic energy across the surface of the earth, and there has to be an adjustment for that somewhere, and it causes terrible earthquakes. The crust of the earth begins to break up. And also the movement of this air, it causes a tremendous movement of wind that's totally unnatural. It results in terrible, terrible storms of destruction like nothing we've ever seen. When it's over with, this planet will not be inhabitable. There'll be nothing left. There'll be dead bodies strewn from one end of the earth to the other. I believe that the Lord will hold back the final cataclysm of this until that moment that they're trying to repulse Christ at his coming and destroy his people in one death decree. And then it says every man's hand will be against his brother. The locusts are called in the east the teeth of the wind because they destroy everything as they move in their path. These armies are going to fight, and as they fight for the last bit of advantage, even while the bombs are going off, they become a world of their own. Irrespective of what's happening in the civilian population, they're fighting to maintain the landscape for political purposes, and the war will rage in spite of anything that happens to you here on that ground, on the ground, and there's no way of escaping it. The technology is just far too advanced. They have technology where that machine gun can come right up out of the water and go right into action. Dropping these men, they'll come from the land, they'll come from the sea, they'll come through the forests. And you know, right now they have the technology from a satellite to photograph a golf ball on the surface of the earth. They can photograph a license plate and read every letter in it from space today. And they can do this with infrared photography or other types of photography. There is absolutely no way that any of our people will escape. There's no place that we're going to hide. There's no place where we can go. Every single one of us will be surrounded, and very likely there'll be a gun aimed at each one of us. And they'll be simply waiting for the order to destroy us. And it's in those agonizing moments before God, we're pleading for deliverance. We have trusted in Jesus with everything. We've isolated ourselves from the world. We've become the objects of tremendous hatred. And now it looks as if there's no hope for us. Can we continue to believe in those extreme moments? You see, and what's going to make those moments any easier than the moments that we have now? Those moments will be so much more discouraging than the experiences you have now. If you can't gain victory today, you will not be part of that group then. In that awful moment, as we're about to be destroyed, we look up and we're going to see a dark cloud about the size of a man's hand. We know that it's the token of our coming Savior. And at that moment we realize that divinity, the power that upholds and creates the universe, the universal infinite God whose Word made absolutely everything, is moving through His creation and approaching this little tiny planet on this earth. And I imagine that we ourselves will be trembling. The awesomeness of the moment will overtake our humanity, and we'll be trembling ourselves. From the midst of that cloud, maybe we'll begin to see a glow. And from that glow, tremendous amount of light begins to burst out as thousands upon thousands, billions of angels surround a center of absolute magnificence and glory beyond our wildest imagination. At that moment in time, the wicked realize, as the voice of God says, it is done, and each one of our groups light up with a beautiful rainbow covering each one of us. They'll realize that these were the ones who could greet each other with a holy kiss and watch each other's feet. These were the ones that God was coming to save, and they had been deceived. It says, enter into the rock and hide thee in the dust for fear of the Lord and for the glory of His majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. As those massive clouds, those convulsing clouds of nature begin to open up before the presence of the infinite God, clothing His Son in majesty and glory, and angels to be seen from one horizon to the other like a great dome of light and glory and clouds with lightning flashing in all directions and rainbows flashing in all directions as the light of God flashes through the clouds of heaven. We're standing there in amazement, and our bodies are shaking in anticipation of the moment. Terror seizes each one of us, and as we look up, the angels stop their singing, and there's a moment of awful silence. Our cry has gone up, who will be able to stand? And there's a moment of awful silence, and then Jesus says, my grace is sufficient. You see, when Jesus says, let there be light, you know what happened? There was light. When Jesus said, let the green grass come forth, the green grass burst forth from the ground at the word of God. And now as Jesus stands there on the beautiful cloud and looks down upon His people that have waited for Him for so long, and He says, my grace is sufficient. It's an eternal thing. Whatever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. And God doeth it that men should fear before Him. Once Jesus announced that to us, it's eternal. And our hearts light up, and we yell out in victory. And the wicked fall back. They're going to turn upon each other. It says that, and they shall go into the holes and the rocks and into the caves of the earth for fear of the Lord and for the glory of His majesty when He arises to shake terribly the earth. In that day a man shall cast his idols of silver and his idols of gold which they made, each one for him to worship, to the moles and to the bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks and to the tops of the ragged rocks for fear of the Lord and for the glory of His majesty when He arises to shake terribly the earth. As those clouds open up, terrible hailstones, 60 pounds apiece, come falling out of the sky, and they crush absolutely everything and everybody. And if there was anything left, we know that coming out from underneath that glorious cloud will be a sheet of flame that surrounds this entire earth and burns up totally the atmosphere. Nothing of the tainted atmosphere of earth is here when the angels come down. It'll go right down into those caves, and those people who fled into the caves will be totally burned at that time. And you and I will stand as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did in the fiery furnace in those moments just before Christ, the angels come to take us home. The sinners in Zion are afraid. Fearfulness has surprised them, surprised the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly. He that despiseth the gain of oppression, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stoppeth his ears from hearing of blood, and shutteth his eyes from seeing evil. Friends, do you think you can own a television and stand through the time of trouble? Do you think you can sit down and listen to radio and the commercials and the news and go through the time of trouble? Not according to the Word of God. Our eyes should be now beholding the King in His glory through His Word, and then we will behold Him really at His coming. It's extremely important now that we make a covenant with our eyes, that we turn away from all sight of sin. When that is done, this surface of this earth will be like one great cinder, one great ashen ball. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munition of the rocks. Bread shall be given him. His water shall be sure. Just like God took care of Elijah, just like He fed the church in the wilderness, He now fulfills the same promises to His people. And we'll dwell where the angels have brought us, and God will supply all of our needs until that awful moment. And then as we look up, the horrors of the convulsions of nature are taking place. The very angels of God will come and be by our side. In that moment, the wicked will be raised, and of course we'll rise up to meet them. And all who have died in the third angel's message would have been risen just before that, of course. But friends, that's going to be a wonderful moment. Our eyes should be fixed on that wonderful moment. Right now, we should be saying that I'm waiting for Jesus, and my eyes are on Him and nothing else. Can you see why the prophet of God says that the three angels' message given in their order to occupy the first place in our minds and nothing else is to be allowed to occupy our attention? That woman felt the love of Christ in the appeal to God's people and knew the desperateness of the hour in which we live and the importance of drawing close to Jesus before it's forever too late. It's time now to identify with Christ so closely that nothing else comes into our attention or into our minds. We start with our children first and our loved ones and bringing Christ to them. But remember, at any moment you turn to Jesus, at any moment you submit to Him and He gives you His justification, you at that moment are as if you never sinned. And as long as you stay in Christ, the past remains buried and the future is totally in the hands of a sanctifying God. We know that heaven is secure. You know, the moment that you are in Jesus and the Spirit is in your heart and you believe totally and entirely upon Him, you're very comfortable in leaving the future entirely in His hands. For life or for death, for better or for worse, you're united with divinity, and whatever happens to you, you don't care. Your home's heaven, not this earth any longer. You live in a better land. And it's not with joy that you look forward to living on in this world and preparing to live in this world. You're dead. And if someone should bring your life to an end at that moment, it would be a blessing to you. My wife once looked at me once with tears in her eyes, as we've studied these things, and she said, my only hope and concession now is this statement here that says that your children will be laid to rest before these things take place. And she's found great comfort in that. And when she's mentioned that to other ladies, they think she's crazy to want to see her children laid to rest. But she's not crazy. The Spirit of God lives in my wife, and she's looking forward to the coming of Jesus Christ. Right now, just this weekend, Jesus has been pleading on your hearts to make a stand for Christ for time and for eternity. And I believe that there's only one illustration that can meet just a little bit in our human emotions something of what might take place in the heart of Christ when we refuse to give our lives to Him. The Lindberghs, after they became world-renowned for his flight, had a little child, little 2-year-old toddler. And they loved that baby. It was just the center of their attentions. But because he was so famous, because he was wealthy, that baby became the object of kidnappers. They took the baby, and then they sent him They took the babies and they sent him a letter. And in that letter, they told him that he would have to send a certain amount of ransom in order to get the baby back, and then he would receive another letter telling him where to find the baby. And they didn't care about the money. They were happy to pay the ransom. They gladly paid the ransom, and then they waited patiently for the letter to come so they could find their little one. The letter came, and they very carefully followed its instructions, but at the end of the instructions, there was no baby. A few weeks later, they received another letter, and they followed its instructions carefully, and at the end of it, there was no child. And this went on for months. Finally, someone found the grave of the baby, and it had been dead the whole time. You see, they had paid the ransom. They had followed the instructions. They had done everything necessary to get their baby back. And Jesus has done everything to get you and I back. Everything. And friends, if we're lost, Jesus' love for us is far greater than the love of a parent for a child. He gave up all eternity for us. He left the throne of glory and came back to this terrible world, knowing exactly the suffering he would have to go through for you and for me. And if you're lost, friends, Jesus will suffer and miss you throughout all eternity, bearing your scars into the ceaseless ages of eternity, the only human being that is mutilated forever for you. And if you're lost, it'll be a great tragedy that all eternity cannot reclaim or change. Now, in these last moments before the end, we have an opportunity. Don't blow it. Don't lose your opportunity to come completely into Christ now and to vindicate his name in these last moments of time. Let's kneel down together, shall we? Dear Father in heaven, as we come before thy eternal throne, Lord, our minds are so dull, our hearts are so hard. You've told us to please look upon your love, that it would be formed within us. And yet, Lord, we're so insensitive sometimes. We could only comprehend something of the love of the infinite God. We just plead with thee, O Lord, in these last moments of time to give us a view of our Savior dying on the cross of Calvary to win us. That would so change our way of feeling and thinking that this world would have no pull any longer. Dear Lord, especially do I pray for the young people. I realize how hard it is. They have not had a lot of the serious experiences in life to understand how serious these things can be. I plead with you to give them a sense of eternal things and the urgency of the hour. These things I plead, Lord, for each one in this room, that not one soul here will be lost when you make up that number and when you come in the clouds of heaven, Father. We want to go home. We're sick of this world and all the horror and misery and death here. Please use us in any way you want to, dear God, and then take us home. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Friends, the prophecies that are taking place all around us make it clear that Jesus is coming very, very soon. There's a song that I just love that tells about his soon coming and the signs all around us, and that when these signs take place, we're to look up because our redemption draws nigh. And I'd just like to share that song with you tonight. Years of time have come and gone since I first heard it told how Jesus would come again someday. If back then it seemed so real, then I just can't help but feel how much closer his coming is today. Signs of the times are everywhere, and there's a brand new feeling in the air. Keep your eyes upon the eastern skies. Lift up your head, redemption draweth nigh. War
wars and strife on every hand. Violence fills our land, and still some people doubt He'll come again. But the Word of God is true. He'll redeem His chosen few. Don't lose hope. Soon Christ Jesus will descend. Signs of the times are everywhere, and there's a brand new feeling in the air. Keep your eyes upon the eastern skies. Lift up your head, redemption draweth nigh. Lift up your head, redemption draweth nigh.